Hey there, fellow Canyon crazies. My name is Brian Special, and this is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show presented by Bright Angel Outfitters. The Rim2Rim pack is now available for pre-order at brightangeloutfitters.com. This is the 22-liter day pack designed for canyon day hikes, but obviously worthy of any day hike on the planet. The pockets and pouches on the front shoulder straps, the fully insulated pocket for water bladders and more, and the simple, adjustable, one-size-fits-most design makes the Rim2Rim pack everything we hoped it would be as we developed it over hundreds of miles below the rim. There are plenty of great packs out there, but this is the only one designed with the canyon hiker in mind first. Please give it a look at brightangeloutfitters.com. At Bright Angel Outfitters, we do it all for the love of the canyon. All right, today on the show, Grand Canyon Facebook mastermind Benedict Dughoff is back for a Q&A session on a few of the more popular topics that come up in Benedict's uber-popular Grand Canyon Facebook community, which features groups like Grand Canyon Hikers, Grand Canyon Rim2Rim, Grand Canyon Transportation and Ride Sharing, and many, many more, which we will list in the show notes. There's no better place to get questions answered and to do much of your research than in these groups. And there's a whole community of folks out there who are willing to help. Today, we'll do our best to answer some of those burning questions, trail conditions, Rim2Rim, R3, hiking poles, and much more. We'll do so in depth. Here now is my conversation with Benedict Dughoff on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show presented by Bright Angel Outfitters. All right, Benedict, a lot of questions come into the groups, and you get the same ones over and over again. This is one that I thought was a little bit different. I really like this one. It came from Lindsay Evanhoff into the Rim2Rim group. And she says, this may sound like a silly question, but I need a clear answer. This is not a silly question, Lindsay, by the way. What is the terrain of most of the trail? We have several training hikes we're doing, and one is super rocky and much harder, and I'm wondering which we need to do more of to prepare. Is it more of a clear path, or is it mostly rocky, or a mix of the two? It's just a very different mentality, and we want to be prepared. I know we need to work on elevation, which we are doing that also. And the thing that struck me about this one, Benedict, is in the group, some of the answers had me pulling my hair out, because you and I have a lot of experience on the corridor trails, but some of these answers that we got, we're talking about how it's the easiest trail in any national park. It's well-groomed. It's smooth. It's the easiest experience you will ever have in your life, basically, is what they were saying. And I would not necessarily consider that to be very responsible information to pass along to someone, because is it just me, or are the corridor trails, they can be pretty rough?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it makes me wonder if these people are really ignorant or if they're trolling.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, it's, and I would say it's an irresponsible answer because it's so far removed from the, from the factual truth.
Well, and to be fair, maybe comparatively speaking, some of these people are used to like jagged rock and really, primitive style trails. And this one is a groomed trail the whole way, but to call it easy is kind of crazy.
Yeah. And again, one of the problems is people make platitude statements and generalized comments without any nuance or detail. So can you find a stretch of, 100 feet that is completely groomed and even on the corridor trails inside 20 plus miles of course. And you find multiple, probably, right? But what does that prove, right? I mean, you're going more than 20 miles, so you really have to look at it first and foremost from the big picture perspective. And the big picture perspective is that it's a mixed trail, right? You have some smooth sections, you have a bunch of water bars, right? These kind of natural stairs. And you have stairs that are made out of rocks, especially in the first few miles down South Kaibab, that are very uneven, even though the craftsmanship and the workmanship on it is remarkable. I mean, these people almost 100 years ago that built this, I have nothing but respect for him.
Incredible.
Right? So essentially you're dealing with a mixture. If I make a priority list of, the challenges of what is hard to do in a 20 plus mile rim to rim, would I put the specific terrain at the top? No, I wouldn't do that. Right? I think the accumulative descent and ascent, the distance, the weather, temperature conditions, things like that are likely going to be more taxing than the terrain itself. So if we're looking at training, right? Because I think you mentioned that was part of the question. Also, a little bit like how do you prepare? How do you train for that? Again, then I would look at the priorities, right? And the priority aspects are the distance, the time of year conditions, the descent, perhaps the altitude. So focus on that first. But then I definitely, I would pick, if you can, I would pick a natural trail, right? That has maybe some technical elements in there, but is not prohibitive, right? It's not like you have to scramble the whole time, because that's not realistic either. So something where you can walk, hike for many, many hours and keep a decent pace going would probably be my recommendation for training.
Sure. And the trail conditions, Lindsay, it's not like a smooth walk in the park, like some of those answers made it sound like. And the trail can also go through different periods of condition depending on the time of the year. In the winter, it can get very, very muddy. And then once the mud kind of goes away, there are mules on the trails, and the mules are what do the most damage to these trails. And I was on South Kaibab just a couple of weeks ago, and I could not believe how rutted out it was, especially those water bars, the steps that you were talking about, Benedict. Between those, I mean, you can have 2-foot holes in the middle of each one of those steps, and so you have to be very, very, very careful and intentional with every step that you take on these trails, because it is so easy to turn an ankle, to twist a knee, to hyperextend a knee if you look up and you just catch your foot the wrong way. So the trails, if you're expecting a smooth, gravelly kind of path up and down, be prepared for steps, be prepared for ruts from the mules, be prepared for awkward sized steps almost the entire way up and down Bright Angel, South Kaibab, and North Kaibab. And yeah, you can maybe go into cruise control between, say, Phantom Ranch and Manzanita, where it's more level for that 8.5 mile stretch, where you're not really dealing with water bars. You have more of a gradual incline or decline, whichever way you're going the entire way. But outside of that, the trails on the ascent and the descent can be very, very rough. All right, let's try another one, Benedict. We hear about this all the time, and this is a very, very valid question, and I think probably the most important question you need to ask yourself before you decide you're going to do a rim to rim, and that is time of year and time of day. So time. So Tony Sinelli in the Rim to Rim group writes, how horrible is the hike in June, July, and August? And then someone else, Hakuna Matata in the Rim to Rim group writes, when is the best month to hike or run rim to rim? I'm a trail runner, but I know that heat and low humidity are dangerous. Any suggestions? So first of all, how horrible is it to hike in June, July, and August? I think we know what your answer is going to be to that, Benedict. And then on top of that, when is the best time to hike rim to rim?
Well, my first answer is don't be a masochist. And there's really only one reason that I can think of for somebody to do it in June, July, August. I mean, what I can gather from these questions that this is a first time, probably a first timer. Mm-hmm. Maybe not but it sounds kind of like a first time question. There's only one reason, is if you live far away, and this is probably the only time in your life that you're going to be visiting the Grand Canyon, and you're set on as your bucket, your bucket list item. You're set on doing a rim to rim. Then if that's the case, then you better really, really prepare, like over prepare compared to the shoulder season. Have a heat mitigation plan in place. Otherwise, I don't see the upside, right? Why would you want to do a rim to rim? Well, you're trying to have a positive experience and you're trying to make it out alive to the other side, right? I mean, that's why you want to do it. So why pick the middle of the summer if there are other times that are better to do it? What I always recommend is that the best season to do it, or the best time window, is late September to beginning November. First week, maybe first, second week November. That is the most optimal one. Now, is it possible to have an unlikely, unseasonably low temperature day at the end of May? Sure, right? So if you live in Las Vegas or Phoenix or Flagstaff and you're just watching the local weather and you're seeing, oh my goodness, it's only going to be 85 at the bottom, right? Which still requires some heat mitigation. And you can pounce on that, and you have the flexibility of schedule and everything else. Yeah, go for it if that works for you. But if you are coming from further away and you're planning this in, and you're booking lodging and you have a flight and everything else, why not pick statistically the best time period to do that?
And safest.
Now, when we look at this time period, right, we're talking mid to late September. So anywhere from like 6 to 8 weeks, right? So at the most, mid-September to mid-November. When we look at that, from mid-September until October 15, all the services are still on at the North Rim. So the lodge is still open, meaning you can book a room there, which in most cases should be done probably a year in advance because they fill up very quickly. The shuttles run, twice a day. Restaurants are open, etc., right, until October 15. After October 15, the services that the park service administers and the concessionaires, they start shutting down, right? And so, but for example, the Trans-Canyon shuttle between the North and the South Rim will run a full schedule until the end of October, and then I believe once a day until the end of November. So that part is still available. One other aspect that the Park Service typically keeps water on at the North Rim until the third week, sometimes the fourth week in October. That's not as big a deal if you're doing a single rim to rim, but if you're doing a rim to rim to rim and you're starting on the south side, you're going to the north and you're coming back, that's nice to have. But for a single rim to rim, pretty much all the water stations remain open, usually until about the third week of October and sometimes a little bit longer. So if you're going after that, the benefit of beginning November is that you're going to have arguably the best hiking temperatures. And the only consideration is if there's a snowstorm coming in. But in all my years in Arizona, I've rarely seen snowstorms there, and a lot of snow accumulation before December. It can happen, it happens, but most of the time the odds are very slim. Now, again, if you're booking something a year out or 6 months out and you're traveling, spending a lot of money on that, probably would maybe go for October. So October is probably the best month.
Yeah, I've always said November to me is the best month because, but I live in Arizona. I have the fortune of being able to pick dates and be like, oh, the weather looks good next week. I'm going. And I'm sensitive to the fact that a lot of people don't do that. But if you can get in the canyon in mid-November, even I think I was in there the week before Thanksgiving last year.
It's fantastic.
Oh the North Rim before it snows, the colors, the fall colors near Roaring Springs and Roaring Springs Canyon, and just the perfect temperatures. It's just absolutely heavenly. The logistics are obviously a lot tougher, but man, do you ever think about how unfortunate it is that prime Rim2Rim season in the canyon doesn't start? I mean, it's May 15th is when you can really start doing it because that's when the North Rim opens. October 15th is when the North Rim closes. And that entire 5 months, if you're asking me, the service is closed. Yeah, the service is closed. Yeah. It becomes tougher when the services are not open.
The North Rim stays open.
Right, but it's so unfortunate that the prime season, those 5 months, I can make an argument that it can be too hot the entire season. But what are people supposed to do? I mean, there are so many people, like you said, that come here, and it's a summer vacation, it's a bucket list thing. There's just no other time for them to do it. So it's just so unfortunate. You have to pay such close attention to what the temperatures are going to be. So if you can swing it, to Benedict's point, October into November, absolutely the prime season. November or May is still, man. It could still be too hot.
Oh, it absolutely. And I think both you and I and a lot of other people have we have a wish that somehow all the pieces can come together and the Park Service can actually open the North Rim road up in April, and create a shoulder season on the front end. And recently there was a post in the group, and one of the people that works for the NPS did a fantastic job bullet pointing all the different things that would have to happen and be put into place for that to be possible. And my answer to that is I totally sympathize with that. I get that. And at the same time, it's essentially just a matter of money and political will. Yeah. Because it can certainly be done.
And until people start making noise, it'll just stay the way that it is, right? There's no motivation to change anything. But this is something I believe as strongly as you do about this shoulder season. Yeah. And this season is this is a perfect example of it because, man, I saw pictures at Jacob Lake, and just the road just completely clear because it hasn't been that bad of a winter. Yeah. So this is the perfect example of, man, open it up right now and give us another 5 or 6 weeks of people not having to go down and suffer heat stroke and hyponatremia and all that stuff, because they can hike in prime weather, man.
Let's talk for a quick moment. Sure. One more thing following up on the Rim2Rim and the time of the year and the time of day. So let's say that you're somebody who does not have the opportunity to do it later in the year, October, November, or pick a cool day in May or so. And you have to go in June, July, or August. A couple of key points are obviously you have to be ready for the heat, and not just the heat in one moment, but over the course of many, many hours, right? So you have to be ready for that in the face of physical exertion. You also have to know your body quite well. You have to know when symptoms are coming up, that things are going wrong, when to slow down, when to stop, when to ask for help, things like that. How to prevent needing to ask for help, right? And then the other thing is that more so than the heat, it's direct sun exposure that is probably the biggest challenge.
Agreed.
And when I think of direct sun exposure, I can say that even with temperatures in the 70s and 80s, with direct sun exposures, I've needed to started implementing some heat mitigation already with those temperatures. And that may sound strange, but it's not when you put it in the context of a highly exertive endurance activity, right? So you're I mean, you're doing a lot. You're pushing your body, and so you're more susceptible. It's one thing to stand still when it's 95 out there. It's another thing to be working really hard when it's 75 and you have that direct sun exposure. So that the one thing that is a variable that you do have some control over, right? So if you're starting, for example, at the North Rim, you're doing a rim to rim, can you start at a time in the summer that gets you down to Phantom Ranch by, I don't know, 10 o'clock in the morning, right? And then if that's the case, well, maybe you just hang out until 5 p.m., right? Or 6. And then as it gets towards sunset, then you start hiking out. So that's just one example of how to be smart with the heat and the sun exposure.
Okay, since we're talking sun exposure and hiking in the warmer months, there's no better time than right now to tell you about the Grand Canyon Shade Tracker. I stumbled upon this incredible technology which shows you when and where you will have shade last summer during a Rim to Rim. So I reached out to the developer, and the result is a canyon-specific shade tracker. What that means is you can go to gchikerdude.com and enter your route, like Rim to Rim, or even a landmark like Devil's Corkscrew or The Box. Then you enter the date of your hike, and voila, you can see in real time every minute of that day when and where you will have shade. This is a tool we invested in because we think it will help save lives, or at a minimum, help you have a much more comfortable hike when it is hot out. Check it out at gcshadetracker.com. It's completely free, just part of our commitment at Bright Angel Outfitters to help you have the best possible experience in the Grand Canyon. Now back to the show. Okay, hiking poles. Yes, must, optional, not needed. I never use them, but have them. Should I start training with them? Thoughts? Oh, I got thoughts on this one, but I'll let you start.
So if I take a step back, and I think if there is a tool that you can have that can be beneficial, is there a reason not to use it? And there may be some particular reasons for certain people or for in certain situations, but generally, the question I would have is why not? Why not bring hiking poles? Why not use them? And there's actually 3 good reasons that I can think of for why to use hiking or trekking poles. And the first one is safety. If you roll an ankle, you step wrong, you have hiking poles, it allows you to distribute your weight and carry on, obviously to the degree that you still can. Of course, if you can't move anymore, then you need to go to, you need more help than that. But it can, if you do get injured, or if you're trying to prevent injuries, the hiking poles can help, number 1. Number 2, if you train with them correctly in a certain way, they can actually increase your performance as well. This is sometimes scoffed at in America by hikers and trail runners, but if you go to Europe and you look at the trail runners in Europe and the top trail runners in the world and the ones that win all these ultra marathons, using hiking poles is completely part of that culture, performance culture.
You think it's you think it's a macho thing here? I've never heard this before. You think it's just look at me, I don't need them here?
Maybe a little bit. I think it's more tradition. Like it hasn't been part of the tradition here. I'm a very good example of that. I think my first 10 or so rim to rims, I thought using poles was kind of a weakness. So maybe a macho thing. I was like, that's like cheating, right? Number 1. that's cheating. And number two, I didn't understand or realize that it could actually help me go faster. Two. Then I tried it on one of them, and
light bulb.
I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. So yes, so safety, injury mitigation, injury prevention. And then the third one is Good Samaritan. Because, and this happened to me on one of my Rim2Rims, I was really, really struggling. And I came across somebody that I knew, and he saw that I was really struggling. He said, here, go ahead, use my poles. And so I used the poles, and then I gave it back to him later, and it was just an absolute godsend. And then I was like, you know what? I can do the same thing for others if it really comes to that. So we can all be helping each other out down below. You know, nobody goes down on the trails in the canyon planning to do something stupid or to get injured. Nobody does that, right? But it happens, and it happens to people who are as prepared as you can be. And of course, it happens maybe a greater likelihood to people who are not prepared or not very respectful to the challenges. But either way, so those are the three reasons that I would suggest that it's good to have poles. And then the connected question is, should I train with them? Well, absolutely, right? I would say it's almost counterproductive, with the exception of if you bring them for a safety or injury reason and you just keep them stuck in your pack. You know, hopefully you don't need to use them. But if you're going to use them for performance purposes, then obviously you want to train with them and you want to figure out how to use them correctly. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on poles are well documented on this show. I will not be in the canyon without them. The first time I did a rim to river, I did them. I didn't even consider using poles. It wasn't even something that crossed my mind. And I remember when I got down to the river, after going down too fast and taking that absolute pounding that is unique to canyon hiking because you're going downhill first for so long, and my legs were destroyed, and it became a death march up Bright Angel. Ever since then, I have used poles on every single hike on hundreds of miles in the canyon. I would just not be without them. It's a safety thing. It's a performance thing. It's everything that you said. I don't see the negative unless you plan on being on the flats and not using them, and then it becomes a hassle to have to fold them up and to attach them to your pack. Whatever. I use them the entire time, no matter what the terrain is. I just feel so strongly about it. It improves your performance. It takes so much of the shock away, especially on the downhill, because you know the smooth trails that we talked about earlier, Benedict, the smooth, easy Grand Canyon trails. Well, you're doing these step downs down these steps, these water bars that can be 12, 18, 24 inches, and your legs are taking an absolute beating when you're going down. So to be able to brace a pole at the bottom of that step and just kind of ease yourself down, you're taking a lot of the shock off of your legs, and that is helping you. It's saving your energy and saving your muscles for later in the hike when you need them. So yeah, poles 100% every time, always.
Let me add one more point.
Sure.
Based on what you just said. I only use the absolute lightest weight poles. The only reason I would use sturdier ones if I'm carrying a 30, 40, 50 pound pack and I'm going very slow. But if I'm day hiking or trail running, I want something that almost weighs nothing. And those tend to cost a little more, but for me, they're absolutely worth it.
And I could see that for someone who's interested in time or moving briskly when every ounce matters, that the lighter, more expensive poles might make sense. I always say, look, I'm more of a plotter. I'm a hiker. I'm not a runner. I have been perfectly happy with the poles from Costco, $34.99, and the poles from Walmart, $24.99. Our buddy Coach Arnie Benedict uses the poles from Walmart, and he's about to do a double crossing, an R5 here in October. He uses the one from Walmart. So if you're not interested in speed, that's the time when I would tell you to, maybe save your money and just get the telescoping poles that are still perfectly sturdy And man, I've used them for hundreds of miles and I've been perfectly happy with them. But that makes sense, using lightweight ones in certain situations. Okay, got time for one more?
Yeah.
And I've heard more and more about this than I remember in the last couple of years. And that is people doing rim to rim to rim. Obviously, that's always traditionally been, a runner's bucket list kind of thing. But I think more and more hikers seem to be taking R3 on. So I thought that this question was interesting. It says, this might be unanswerable, but I'll ask anyway. To those who have completed rim to rim to rim, how or at what point did you know you could really do it? For people like me who haven't yet but want to, there's a healthy dose of respect to say you think you've done other hard things while remembering the canyon is a different animal than your normal run or hike. So what to you would be the progression of when you knew, Benedict, because you've done this many times, when did you know that you were ready for a rim to rim to rim, a double crossing?
This is a really good question. And what I appreciate the most is that this person clearly has respect for the challenge. Yeah. What concerns me much more is when I see posts and people underestimating or downplaying the canyon,
and then not listening to other people who have the experience. Yeah. They're not listening to the answers that people are giving them. Like, you may want to think about this. You may want to, do some more research about what this entails, because this thing is a different monster.
Absolutely. One of the core pieces of advice that I give people that are going to do a rim to rim to rim is to have more than 50% of your energy reserves when you reach the other rim left over for the way back. So if you can, only use 1/3 of your energy on the first half of the trail. If you do that, your odds of having a good return increase dramatically. And what that means is you have to be conservative on the first downhill, and you definitely have to be conservative on that ascent, that halfway point ascent. And it's hard. It for some people maybe that's not that difficult. For me, it's hard. I really had to train myself to slow down. That's an important point. How do you know that you're ready? Well, I think we can split that question up into kind of two ways to look at it. Has somebody done a rim to rim already, right?
Yeah.
That's one question. So if they've done a rim to rim already, they have a good indication of how difficult that was for them. That is quite helpful, right? Even if they've done a rim to river, which is kind of a little bit shorter version of a rim to rim, that's a very good indication. So ideally, I would say if you can, go to the Grand Canyon before you do a rim to rim to rim, and do a rim to river, or do a rim to rim, and use that as a baseline, and then go back home and train for at least 6 months, and then attempt your rim to rim to rim, maybe 6 months or a year or however long it takes to get to a higher level of fitness, right? So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is somebody cannot do that, or they're too far away, or it's just not part of their plans, right? So how do they know they're ready? Well, my second rule of thumb is if you can do something that is twice as hard as a rim to rim to rim, you know that it's very likely that you'll be able to do it.
You mean twice as hard as a rim to rim?
No, twice as hard as a rim to rim to rim.
How are you going to know that until you do it?
Well, for example, if you do a 100-mile trail race, right? Check out Aravaipa's, like the Javelina 100 or some of these other 100-milers. Vacation races used to be called ultra adventures. They have fantastic 100-mile trail races. The point I'm making is, if you can do one of those, right, which is twice as long, more than twice as long as a Grand Canyon rim to rim, and has maybe just same or even a bigger elevation profile, you will have the confidence that you've at least covered that distance and amount of elevation change. And I'm not kidding about this, right? I mean, this is the question. How do you know you're ready? Well, do something that is harder, and at least not like, 20% harder. No, at least 1.5 to 2 times harder. Do that, at least once, maybe a couple times. I mean, I remember this was after I did a rim to rim to rim. I remember I did the Bryce Canyon 100, which maybe definitely one of my favorite ultras that I've ever done. Everything above 9,000 feet, 100 miles between 9,000 and 11,000 feet altitude, with 18,000 feet of up and 18,000 feet of down, right?
Wow.
So, I mean, that's just an example. Like, if you can do that one and you don't run into major complications, yeah, you'll be able to do a rim to rim to rim.
All right, well, I got to give people some hope here, because not everybody's a ultra runner like you. You guys are built different, man. You guys are just built different. It's just the way it is. A lot of us are not going to be doing 100-mile races, but we still dream about doing rim to rim to rim, because there's just such an allure of the double crossing. There's just, there's so much pain involved in it, and suffering, and being on the trail and in the canyon for, up to 24 hours. I did it in November for the first time. I am not an ultra marathoner. I am not an elite athlete. I'm 51 years old. I am more of a plodder for sure. But I love being in the canyon. So if you would have told me a few years ago that I would even consider doing a double crossing, a rim to rim to rim, I would have told you were nuts, because the idea of it just blew my mind. But I slowly chipped away at it, and I did that by a progression of canyon hikes. Yep. First, you do rim to river. You make sure you can do rim to river comfortably. You do that several times. Then you do rim to rim. You make sure that you can do that comfortably, several times if you can. Not at the same time, but just, getting more comfortable with the terrain and the unique nature of canyon hiking. Then I booked a room last October on the North Rim at the Grand Canyon Lodge, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do a 2-day rim to rim to rim. So I hiked over the first day, stayed the night, and then hiked back the next day. So is that a true rim to rim to rim? I mean, I don't know. Everybody makes these distinctions. It was a double rim to rim. It was an R3 with a night in between. But that was my next test. It's like, okay, now I've done that over the course of, with a night in between. Now I'm going to give the 1-day rim to rim to rim a go. And I pulled it off. And it took me 19 hours to do. It was extraordinarily difficult. It's twice as hard or more than a rim to rim, but it can be done. And if you are fortunate enough to live close to the canyon and to be able to build yourself up by doing canyon hikes, there is really no substitute for it. So you don't necessarily have to be an ultra marathoner. You don't have to be Jim Walmsley, who's doing a 5-hour and 55-minute rim to rim to rim. Is there a more? I always tell people, Benedict, that is one of the most incredible achievements, athletic achievements in the history of human history. 5 hours and 55 minutes doing it. And by the way, when he set that record of a double crossing in 5:55, he accidentally, by going from South Kaibab to North Kaibab, he accidentally at the time set the rim to rim record at that time, 2 hours and 39 minutes. Which, if most of us are lucky, we're just getting to Black Bridge at that time, and Walmsley's standing up there on the North Rim. But I digress. Not everybody's Jim Walmsley. Not everybody's Bendict Dughoff. Not everybody's an ultramarathoner. It can be done, but you do have to be intentional about it, and you do have to be smart and extremely serious, to your point, about preparing for it.
And I really appreciate your systematic approach there. And I think the rim to rim over 2 days is an excellent feedback mechanism, because in some ways, sometimes it can be harder, because if you spend a lot of energy that first day and then you go to sleep and you wake up and everything is painful and hurting, and psychologically the idea that you got to go all the way back across, that's a formidable challenge. Can you do a rim to rim if you've never done something at that level before? Yes. Is it possible? Are you going to have a good experience? Certainly possible. If you want the absolute confidence that, you are 100% prepared for it in terms of your part, you're not the external conditions, then my recommendation is do something that is twice as hard. And if you can do that, yeah, you'll be fine.
Benedict, this was fun, man. This is great. Bringing some of these questions to life and getting your expert answers as the man who is responsible for the number one resource for a Grand Canyon hiker, and that is the Grand Canyon Facebook community that Benedict has so carefully and thoughtfully created over the past 10 years or so. And I'm serious when I say that, man. It is the number one most valuable resource that anybody hiking the canyon can possibly have. Go in there, ask questions, do your research. That's where so much of it can be done. And there's such a great community in there of folks who are willing to help, who want you to have your best possible experience in the canyon, like we always say on this show. There's a whole community of people in those Facebook groups that want that for you. And Benedict, I know it is a labor of love, man. It is a lot of work to so thoughtfully moderate and administrate those groups. And I think everyone owes you a debt of gratitude. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for all you do for the canyon hiking community, man. We all appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Benedict Dughoff. Again, the list of his many Grand Canyon Facebook groups will be in the show notes. All right, something coming up that I wanted to tell you about. I had the opportunity last week to hike with Dr. Tom Myers, who not only has been a physician at the Grand Canyon Clinic for the last 30 years, but who's also the co-author of the famous Over the Edge, Death in the Grand Canyon book. I got to tell you, I did not know what to expect when I finally picked that book up, but wow. It's really more of a survival guide than a book about death, and I really think it should be required reading for canyon hikers, especially those going out into the backcountry. As much time as I've spent below the rim, I still have learned so much from this book about, things like flash floods, hiking off trail, and especially heat emergencies. Did you know, for instance, that if you have a heat emergency in the canyon, it's 10 times as likely to be caused by drinking too much water as it is to be about dehydration? Yeah, hard to believe, I know, but we'll be having Dr. Myers on the show very, very soon to talk about that and about a million other things. I cannot wait to do that and then share it with you all. Folks, if you have an idea for an episode or have a memorable canyon experience you'd like to share, we sure would love to hear about it. Please reach out to me anytime at gchikerdude@brightangeloutfitters.com. That's gchikerdude@brightangeloutfitters.com. I'm always looking for the next great story to tell and can't do it without your help. All right, that's it for now. My name is Brian Special, encouraging you, as always, to go hike the canyon. Take that first step, embrace the journey, and when you get there, whether it's for time goals or taking your time, just hike your own hike. And don't forget to look around and marvel at where you are, because the canyon is truly one of the most awe-inspiring places on the planet. We'll see you next time on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, presented by Bright Angel Outfitters.